Hey everyone, my name is Chris A, and today I want to talk about that one time Fox News claimed that 2 plus 2 equals 5. So this week, I wanted to talk about George Orwell's 1984, but when I went to reread it in preparation, I realized there's so much I want to talk about. So today we're just going to be talking about math. Yay! A quick recap. I'm not really going to synopsize the novel too thoroughly. If you're watching this, you've probably already read it, and if you haven't read it, why are you watching some random YouTuber's video about the mathematical implications of a novel written 70 years ago that you haven't even read? I mean, thanks, keep watching. So 1984 takes place in 1984. The United Kingdom is now Airstrip 1, and our protagonist Winston Smith lives in London. The world as we know it consists of three major nation-states: Eurasia, East Asia, and Oceania. Eurasia and East Asia are pretty self-explanatory. Oceania comprises the UK, the Americas, Southern Africa, and of course Oceania itself. As far as we know, these three nations are in a constant state of warfare with one another. The novel's action takes place in London. Although we learn that 85% of Oceania are proles, the working class, the narrative centers around the party, which is basically the government and all its employees. Oceania is led by Big Brother, a totalitarian figurehead. The thesis of 1984 is the political importance of language and free thought, and as such, Big Brother is constantly rewriting history and otherwise propagandizing. A major theme of the novel is the concept of doublethink, which Orwell describes as follows: to know and not to know, to be conscious of complete truthfulness while telling carefully constructed lies, to hold simultaneously two opinions which cancelled out, knowing them to be contradictory and believing in both of them, to use logic against logic, to repudiate morality while laying claim to it, to believe that democracy was impossible and that the party was the guardian of democracy, to forget whatever it was necessary to forget, then to draw it back into memory again at the moment when it was needed, and then promptly to forget it again, and above all, to apply the same process to the process itself. Yikes. Maybe it's easier to understand with a simple example. In the end, the party would announce that 2 and 2 made 5, and you would have to believe it. It was inevitable that they should make that claim sooner or later. The logic of their position demanded it. Not merely the validity of experience, but the very existence of external reality was tacitly denied by their philosophy. But before I get into that, I want to chat real quick about how George Orwell clearly hates women. Since the dystopia of 1984 centers around the suppression of individual liberties, something as simple as sex between consenting adults becomes a political act. And this is honestly a pretty interesting idea. But hey, George Orwell, can you not, maybe don't? Orwell falls into the trap of straight man author introducing woman character when he introduces basically the only woman character in the novel. She was a bold-looking girl of about 27. George Orwell, if she's 27, she's not a girl. She was a bold-looking girl of about 27, with thick dark hair, a freckled face, and swift athletic movements. A narrow scarlet sash, emblem of the Junior Anti-Sex League, was wound several times round the waist of her overalls, just tightly enough to bring out the shapeliness of her hips. And there's more. Our protagonist Winston has some pretty disturbing fantasies about her, which I won't repeat here. But I will let Winston explain it himself. "I hated the sight of you," he said. "I wanted to rape you and then murder you afterwards." And I get the narrative function of having Winston hate women. I mean, the authoritarian government forces its party members to consider sex only as a transaction for reproductive purposes. But the whole "my protagonist hates women" thing came a little too easy for George Orwell. Okay, back to the math. If you're an extremely online person like me, you probably remember this math problem from last year. 8 divided by 2 times parentheses 2 plus 2 end parentheses. There was some disagreement online about what the answer was, with some claiming it's 1 and some claiming it's 16. Now first off, it's not impossible that a mathematical expression have two possible answers. For example, the square root of 4 is plus or minus 2. In fact, using square roots, we can come up with an expression that does equal both 16 and 1. Namely, 8.5 plus the square root of 56.25. The square root of 56.25 is plus or minus 7.5. 8.5 plus 7.5 is 16, 8.5 minus 7.5 is 1. But this only works because the square root of a positive number will always give you a positive and negative result. Our viral problem isn't so complicated. It doesn't go beyond the 4 basic functions of arithmetic: addition, subtraction, division, and multiplication. So we shouldn't expect there to be more than one possible answer, which means that either 16 or 1 is incorrect. So let's solve it. The only thing we really need to know to solve this is order of operations. Personally, I learned PEMDAS, but it is my understanding that in some other English-speaking countries, the standard is BODMAS. This discrepancy, how you learn the order of operations, is one of the reasons for conflicting answers. But what people don't seem to understand is that the order of operations doesn't change just because you use different words. PEMDAS stands for parentheses, exponent, multiplication, division, addition, subtraction. BODMAS stands for brackets, orders, division, multiplication, addition, subtraction. The first thing to tackle is the multiplication-division switch. The order of these two doesn't actually matter since multiplication and division are essentially the same operation. 4 divided by 2 can also be written as 4 times 1/2. Same goes for addition and subtraction. 4 minus 2 is the same as 4 plus negative 2. So in both cases, you just go left to right. As for parentheses and brackets are the same thing, at least in arithmetic. In fact, outside the US, parentheses may just be called round brackets. And finally, exponents and orders are the same thing. I don't like using the word order in this context since it has a lot of other meanings in mathematics. For example, right now we're talking about the order of operations. Exponent is far less ambiguous. Some interpretations of BODMAS use the O for of, which is a multiplication word, as in half of 2 is equal to 1/2 times 2. This is an inaccurate mnemonic because not only does it include multiplication twice, it ignores exponents. All this to say, PEMDAS and BODMAS teach you the exact same process. Parentheses first, exponents next, multiplication and division left to right next, and then addition and subtraction left to right finally. So let's solve.
8 divided by 2, parenthesis 2 plus 2. First we do parentheses, which means what's inside of the parentheses. 2 plus 2 equals 4. Easy. Here's the next place people trip up. When we have two numbers like this, with either one or both contained within parentheses, this is multiplication. There are 3 very common ways to express multiplication, using parentheses, an X, or a dot. In advanced math, the parentheses are most common, at least in my experience, so all 3 of these expressions are equivalent. Okay, since this 2 and this 4 are multiplied, we're done with parentheses. There are no exponents, so we can skip that. Next is multiplication and division together. 8 divided by 2 is 4. 4 times 4 is 16. Boom, that's it. The answer is 16. This is the mathematically sound way to solve the problem. The problem that people are solving when they get 1 actually requires another layer of parentheses. 8 divided by parenthesis 2 plus 2, end parenthesis, end parenthesis. In this case, you solve the innermost parentheses first. 2 plus 2 is 4. Now you have another operation inside another set of parentheses, so solve that. 2 times 4 is 8, and you're left with 8 divided by 8, which is indeed 1. But you'll notice these are 2 different problems.
Thanks for bearing with me. I know not everyone loves math. I'm no professional mathematician, but I did get a math minor in college just because I happened to take so many math classes for fun anyway. There's a certain itch in my brain that only math can scratch. Everything in life is so complicated. Everything exists on a spectrum. Even something as straightforward as what species a certain animal is vastly complicated. There are subspecies and breeds. Certain species can mate with certain other species. All species adapt and evolve over time, and who's to say when a species has adapted enough new traits to qualify as a new species? And none of this even matters. Species is just a box we humans have designed to help talk about a specific scientific concept. A cat doesn't know that it's Felis domesticus, it just is. And I don't mean to suggest that there's no nuance in mathematics, or that there aren't people dedicating their lives to new fields of maths. But for the purposes of this essay, I'm not concerned with the cutting edge of mathematical research. I'm talking about the simpler fields of math, like arithmetic, algebra, and even calculus, where you're either right or you're wrong. Nothing in life is ever that simple. And you may think math can only be so binary because it's a construct.
How did people know what they were looking for when they started theorizing about formulas? Because I wouldn't know what to look for if I'm making up math.
And that's true. Math is a human construct, but it describes real phenomena. In fact, the first numbers we learn, 1, 2, 3, and so on, are called natural numbers. If you have 2 apples and you get 2 more, that will always equal 4. The words don't matter, of course, because that depends entirely on what language you're speaking. But the concepts of 2 and plus and 4 are never up for debate. And that's what all these symbols represent. They represent unchanging ideas that can live entirely in the abstract, but can also be used to describe the real world. In a world of ambiguity and nuance, not to mention dishonesty, bias, and human error, math is the only thing you can be absolutely certain of. I am certain that the solution to this problem is 16. More certain than I am that the sun will set tonight or rise tomorrow or that it will rain somewhere in the world in the next 3 weeks. I mean, I'm pretty certain of those things, but I could be wrong. I can't be wrong about maths. Well, I can if I mess up. But barring human error, you can't be wrong with arithmetic. There is no other side. There's this misconception that some people have that a free press ought to be fair and balanced. And those are both good things for journalists to aspire to. But balance should never be more important than truth. If you were reading a news article about the planet Earth, it would be absurd to see, in the interest of fairness, some people do believe the Earth is flat. Some ideas are just not worth propping up, even if doing so seems to be fair. But really, it's not even fair, it's just balanced. It's unfair to the truth, it's unfair to the scientists who have proven that the Earth is round-ish. It's even unfair to the people who actually believe the Earth is flat. So, with everything I've talked about, it should be no surprise that this Fox News article made me livid. And I would never claim that Fox News is some bastion of ethical journalism. They're not as divorced from reality as somewhere like Breitbart, but their big-name personalities are regularly contradicted by fact-checkers. And I will note that people like Tucker Carlson and Sean Hannity offer analysis rather than news, but that still doesn't give them license to tell lies. But in any case, to end a story, even a fluffy 21st century human interest piece that's basically just copy-pasted tweets from random internet people with 2 + 2 = 5 is a straight-up lie. I know, they didn't explicitly say 2 + 2 = 5, but we can fix that real quick. They said the answer to the problem is 1 and 16, so we can write it like this.
1 = 8 divided by 2 parenthesis 2 + 2 end parenthesis equals 16. By the transitive property, if A equals B and B equals C, A equals C, we get 1 = 16. And we can do some quick math magic to prove that 2 + 2 = 5. 1 = 16, subtract 1 from both sides. You get 0 = 15, divide by 15, you get 0 = 1. Add 4, and then just rewrite this as 2 + 2 = 5.
Hey Fox News, you lied to us. And I get it, there's virtually no chance that this was written by some mathematician in residence at Fox News. But it shows an extreme disregard for objective truth. The article only mentions one expert opinion, which is, the way it's written, it's ambiguous. In math, a lot of times there are ambiguities. Mathematicians try to make rules as precise as possible. Clearly, when he says in math, a lot of times there are ambiguities, he does not mean, oh yeah, nothing matters, arithmetic is fake, no one is wrong. This is what gets me about the search for balance over truth. Sometimes you end up giving a platform to people who are just plain wrong. Like, I don't know, random people on Twitter who claim they learned it a different way. No, you didn't. You learned it years and years ago when you were a child, and you just don't remember how these specific mathematical concepts work. And guess what? That's fine. I understand that I'm an unusual person for loving math. But just because you vaguely remember something from your 7th grade math class doesn't mean you need to join the conversation. Sure, you have every right to, but just because you can doesn't mean you should. When my doctor tells me something I didn't know was true, I don't respond with, yeah, well, I just learned it a different way. Even if that's true, it doesn't make it valid. Whatever way I learned it is not comparable to the years of study and practice that doctors go through. And anyway, don't the Fox News people hate participation trophies? Getting your tweet published by a major news organization just because you tweeted the wrong answer to a math problem feels pretty much like a participation trophy to me. But I digress. Back to the matter at hand, 1984. In 1984, the denizens of Oceania are told that war is peace, freedom is slavery, ignorance is strength. Orwell calls the claim of 2 + 2 = 5 an inevitability. It's clearly hyperbolic, but is meant to demonstrate just how far Big Brother is willing to go to subjugate its people. And we have every reason to believe people will buy it, not because they're stupid or particularly gullible. As Orwell explains, the problem isn't that citizens are told the opposite of what is true. The real issue is that their experiences have become so limited that they lack the perspective and the language to differentiate between major concepts. If you've watched Fox News in the past 4 years or so, you've probably noticed that their entire business model is basically make any claim you want, the audience doesn't know any better. As Orwell puts it, the party told you to reject the evidence of your eyes and ears.
What you're seeing and what you're reading is not what's happening.
It was their final, most essential command. Much of 1984, at least the first section, centers around Winston's fascination with the past. Winston is obsessed with antiques because they represent the before times. He even interviews an old man about life before Big Brother, but the old man is ultimately no help. Because Big Brother has rewritten history, it's impossible to know exactly what happened decades ago when Big Brother first came to power. Winston's motivation is not how do I get out, but rather how did we get here? Just like in 1984, Fox News has conditioned their audience to accept anything they publish without critical thought. Their claim that 2 + 2 = 5 is, as Orwell puts it, their final, most essential command. Normally, Fox News would count on an ignorance of history and social sciences to convince their audience. An ignorance of arithmetic is far more basic, and therefore primes the audience to accept even more disprovable lies. And remember, only 15% of Oceania are part of the party. Only 15% of people need to believe the lies of Big Brother. As long as the rest are subjugated by the party's economic oppression, they are unable to organize against Big Brother and the party is allowed to survive. Fox News doesn't need to convince everyone that 2 + 2 = 5. They only need to convince those who are willing to die for the party. And something tells me that's exactly what they've done.
Just stick with us. Don't believe the crap you see from these people, the fake news.